Hey guys, Todd Anderson here with another Magic Online video for you. Today we're going to continue our, journey to try to find the best version of Pyromancer's Goggles. Now, as the format starts to develop more and more towards like this mid-rangey, planeswalkery type field, we have to make adjustments in order to help our deck actually challenge these very powerful permanents that people can put onto the battlefield. And in order to do that, we need to try to find the most efficient threats with the highest potential of gaining us some sort of significant advantage should our opponent be unable to deal with it, or give us some sort of effect that our opponent may or may not want to give us. So, with that in mind, today I present to you Dragon Eldrazi Goggles. I don't actually know if this version is very good. I haven't played a game with it, but I've been tinkering with it and trying to find the best configuration that I can for the archetype, because I think the idea behind it is really cool. I think Draconic Roar plus Pyromancer's Goggles is a huge beating, and most decks in the format have a good number of creatures that you can actually target with Draconic Roar. The exception being, I guess, the Esper Planeswalkers deck played by Seth Manfield at the Pro Tour, where he made top 4. But aside from that, almost every deck in the format has a lot of creatures in it, and we're going to try to exploit that by playing a bunch of copies of Draconic Roar as well as Fiery Impulse. So, the heart of the deck, as always, Pyromancer's Goggles, and since OBS still won't let me use the Magic Online card thingy where when I click the card it pops up above my head, we're just going to keep the picture of Goggles here. I could change it to Thunderbreak region, I guess, since that's kind of the new bad boy in the deck. But yeah, let's just go over the deck real quick, and then we'll play a 5-match league with it and see how it goes. I'm not expecting to 5-0. I would be very happy with a 4-1. I'm kind of expecting like a 3-2, because I think that the idea is good, but I'm not sure if the numbers are right in any regard, and I'm gonna see if I can figure out ways to change that in the outro, I guess. The recap. Alright, so let's go over that real quick. First of all, we have a decent number of colorless lands in the deck to help us cast Matter Reshaper, which is our main deck Eldrazi. I think this is a good hedge, because the deck doesn't really have a lot to do on turn 3 other than get back Drownyard Temple, and I wanted something to do that not only could pressure people, but also, if they do deal with it with Grasp of Darkness or what have you, you get to draw a card off of it. And if you're able to hit a land or something, you're able to put that into play, which is pretty sweet. And ramping in this deck is very good. You know, we see a lot of starts with the deck that start with Magmatic Insight, discarding Drownyard Temple, and those are some of the best that the Goggles deck can do, because they're able to start cycling through their deck while also giving them a mini ramp spell to start playing Goggles a turn earlier. It lets you play Chandra a turn earlier, and that's where you start gaining significant advantage. And you really need, you know, that one turn of reprieve when you cast Goggles or get back Drownyard Temple. You need something in the meantime to really, I guess, stem the bleeding. And you know, if you're taking time off to do these things, you have to have a lot of swing back, a lot of ways to get back into the game for the tempo that you spend, you know, just ramping a little bit, or just trying to get Goggles into play and set up for future turns. Now, one thing that I'm going to note is that this deck has far fewer 1-mana red spells than what I'm used to, so it's going to be pretty rare that we want to go cast Goggles and actually do something. I think instead we are using Goggles way more of like when we have 6 mana, we get to go Goggles plus a thing. Maybe it's Draconic Roar, you know, maybe it's Tormenting Voice, or maybe we just wait for another land to cast Magmatic Insight, or something like that. But I think Matter Reshaper should help us bridge the gap, and it's something that I've been wanting to try in the deck for a long time and haven't really found a reason to put it in, because, you know, I've played versions that had Jace, I've played versions that had Nahiri, and in all honesty, a deck like this could maybe even splash for Nahiri, and that's something we may actually talk about later on. But for right now, we're just going to stick to mono red and try to make it so that all of our lands come into play on tab, so we're never falling too far behind. You know, if you splash white or blue, you know, you do get access to the creature land, either Wandering Fumarole or Needle Spires, but that usually requires you to play something like Highland Lake. I keep forgetting the name of the come into play tap lands from the new set. But yeah, you start after playing more lands that come into play tap, and then you end up with like 6 or 7 that do, and it just kind of stinks. But in this version, all of our lands come to play untapped, which is huge. The additional lands that we've added, since we are monocolor, we actually get to play Majoring Network, which I think is actually pretty sweet in the deck. I did play against somebody playing this card in a red-white version, and it just looked great. He was able to cast his Chandra a turn early, and in any matchup where you're kind of slow rolling, where neither of you are really doing much, and you're just kind of sitting with a bunch of removal in hand, you can just start charging up Majoring Network, and then when you go for the kill, you just get to, fall the Titans or, play a Chandra plus another thing all in the same turn. And a deck like this can use that extra mana and put it put it to work, as it were. But on top of Majoring Network, since we're playing Thunderbreak Regent with Draconic Roar, we also get access to Haven of the Spirit Dragon, which is pretty sweet because it taps for red for Thunderbreak, it taps for colorless for Matter Shaper and a bunch of our sideboard cards, but it also is a land that you can sacrifice and actually get back Thunderbreak Regent, and it gives you a little more threat density, which I do love. And then we want to make sure our red count is high. Right now we're sitting on 13 mountains, 4 Shivan Reef, so we have 17-ish red sources. I think 17 is probably the minimum. I would like maybe 18, but that would require cutting either a Haven or a Majoring Network for a Battlefield Forge, and I don't mind doing that, and we may end up doing that if we find that we are not hitting a red early enough, or having to mulligan a significant amount because of not having access to red mana in our opening hand. The second the second red mana that we may need for Thunderbreak Region can come off of Haven though, which is nice. So, as far as the spells are concerned, we have 4 Magmatic, 4 Tormenting Voice. I think that's pretty standard here with Goggles. Some people play 3 Magmatic Insight, but in a monocolor version, I think that we just want 4. We want to make sure that if we start to get a little flooded with lands that are not drawn near our temple, we can turn those into actual spells and actually keep up with our opponent if they're putting a lot of pressure on us. Removal spells, we have 3 Fire Impulse, 4 Draconic Roar, and the Draconic Roar is the new one. I think this card alongside Thunderbreak Region is going to allow us to put a little bit more pressure on Planeswalkers. It's going to allow us to close games much more quickly with Pyromancer's Goggles. We're going to be able to kill, 2 creatures at once, revealing the Thunderbreak Region and deal 6 to them, or maybe even kill their Planeswalker in the process. 2 copies of Kozilek's Return, which is pretty necessary against the Cryptolith Rites decks, the 18-land mono-white human deck, as well as a number of other decks. It's just a good card, and I like having access to a few copies in most of my Goggles main decks. Even though you can't copy it with Pyromancer's Goggles, I think it's a great card to have access to because it's an instant speed way to, pick off creatures from Collect a Company. It's a way to stop you from getting ran over by Ormondal plus Secure the Wastes. Or Westfell Abbey Ormondal with Secure the Wastes. And then the rest of the deck, we have 2 Fall of the Titans and a Burn from Within. Now, Burn from Within, I think, is more of a concession here that this deck doesn't have a ton of cheap spells that are not removal spells. So against a deck where, they're just going to be kind of sitting on their hands, playing some Read the Bones, etc., we're going to want access to maybe one more big X spell that we can cast off of Pyromancer's Goggles or even Majoring Network. And Burn from Within is the only other fireball in the format that actually looks pretty good. And since Fall of the Titans is a little harder to surge in this deck than it would be in, let's say, like a Thing in the Ice Jace blue-red version, I think it's good to have access to one more X spell so that you actually have something to do with your Majoring Network in a lot of spots where you're just charging it up and trying to have this like one big turn. Heart of the deck, like I said, Pyromancer's Goggles. But the other biggies, we have 3 copies of Chandra Flamecaller, and a lot of people only play 2. I've been loving 3 in most of my lists just because you're going to play against very polarized matchups where some people have no creatures, so you just have all this dead removal, and using Chandra to 0 and discard all this removal or all these excess lands is actually a pretty big deal. On top of that, you just need ways to close the game. You need ways to pressure Planeswalkers. You need something to do with extra mana that you get off a Majoring Network and Drown Your Temple. So I like having one more Chandra in the main. The sideboard, we have 4 more removal spells, the 4th Fire Impulse, a single Rending Volley, which can come in a number of scenarios, but is mostly for the mono white 18-land human deck, since we just need more 1-mana ways to interact with them. 2 more Kozilek's Return, which is great against Cryptolith Rights, but also phenomenal against the mono white human deck. And then our sideboard is, against all these control and mid-range decks, we actually just have a ton of Eldrazi creatures. We have a full 11. We have 4 Obligator, 4 Thought-Knots here, and 3 Reality Smasher that we're going to use to hopefully just take advantage of somebody who sides out a lot of their removal spells against us. And even if they don't side out a lot of the removal spells against us, we get to take out most of our removal against these really slow decks and, actually start putting some pressure on them. I like Obligator in a lot of situations. I like being able to play it against a ramp deck, steal, their World Breaker or whatever, and hit them for 8. But for the most part, Obligator is going to just be a 3-mana 3/1 in a lot of situations, and I think that's good enough. We needed a hedge card. We needed a card that was good against ramp, but also could come in against a control deck. So I like Obligator because it can pressure Planeswalkers. If they play an Omnixilus and tick down and kill Thought-Knots here, I want to have a follow-up of either Reality Smasher or Eldrazi Obligator to be able to attack and kill Omnixilus. Same goes for Jace and things like that. But anyway, guys, that is the red Eldrazi Dragon Goggles. We'll call it Groggles. Or Droggles? Eldraggles? I like Eldraggles. Alright, guys, well, let's go ahead and play some matches. I'll be right back.